Well, good afternoon, mates. My name is Vasiliki, and today I'm going to talk to you about our mission, how it is when we come back, but also describe a little bit of my experience, some special moments I've had in Australia. So the name of my presentation is How to Improve the Education Level of Your Students Based on Your Experience Studying and Researching in Australia. My experience was through Swinburne. It's a university that is located in Melbourne, state of Victoria. Oi? All right, that's the place. So the presentation is going to be a little bit of the history about going to Australia, how it is for you to have a life and family moving overseas as a PhD candidate, the life of research and publishing while you're doing your PhD, the professional and personal mission in Brazil, and also our future expectations after coming back and developing our professional activities here in Brazil. It all started in 2000 when I finished my civil engineering course at Escola Politécnica da USP. Then in 2008, I started my master's degree in sanitation and environment. And in 2010, I passed the exams to start being a lecturer at the Federal Institute of Science, Education and Technology of São Paulo. In 2014, I started my PhD at Unicamp, and in the field of water resources, energy, and environment. And in 2016, Unicamp signed an agreement with Swinburne, and I was the first student of Unicamp having a co-tutela agreement to have a joint research with Swinburne and Unicamp. The first 10 years of my life, my professional life, was in the field, working as an engineer, right? But then the other 10 years, I started being in the academic life. So it all started in 2010, even though I also had some schools that I collaborated before while doing my master's degree. The adventure started in 2016. It was very funny because once I talked to my supervisor that I had a friend called Nicole that was living in Australia and that I visited her, and we were all fascinated about Australia, but I had no contact. So I didn't know who I would look for. And then I was in a congress, and he suddenly sent me a WhatsApp message saying, Vasiliki, I've got a place for you in Australia. And I said, what? He said, yes, well, a professor from one institution came here to Unicamp, and they're looking for developing this agreement with Unicamp. Are you interested? I was in the US, talking to him through Skype, through WhatsApp, and I said, of course I am. I hadn't even asked my husband, but I thought he would agree. So I said, of course we are, just go on. And this is, what we call in Brazil, família Buscapé. It's my family. And, well, I was the only one speaking English before going to Australia. None of them could. Well, my boy was just starting. He was 10 years old. My daughter didn't even know how to read in Portuguese. She was doing jardim here in Brazil. It's even before preschool. And I said, what am I going to do? Because I'm going to be a full-time student, and I'll have to take care of them. Because none of them know how to ask for a liter of water, or how to take a bus, how to go to the bank, how to socialize with anyone. How am I going to do it? And I said, oh, God, please give me some strength. Let's try to do it, Are you prepared? And my husband said, okay, it's your time to study now. He's a vet, and he had already done his post-graduation course. He works in the industry as a vet, but he said, oh, it's your time to study, so I'll help you now with the kids. Go on. Just let's search for your dream. You've been looking to do that for some time. Let's do it, And then we were there. So it was all about adaptation in the beginning. Very, like, everybody was happy when we arrived because everything was new. And then, of course, difficulties start coming, you know? You don't know how to communicate. You are still learning. My kids started going to a school that is for immigrants. So they had never seen a Muslim, for example. And then almost all of their friends were from China or refugees from some African countries. And they developed such a beautiful friendship. This experience was the most amazing one in the beginning of our experience in Australia because it was all so charming, you know, kids correlating, coming from different countries. My kids had never seen those kinds of clothes or different kinds of religions, eating with hands, not using forks, drinking hot water instead of cold water. You know, it was all different, and they were amazed. Their best friends were refugees and Chinese. You know, like 80% of the school had this kind of background. And then we saw these beautiful chubby animals like the koala. We started biking because biking is amazing in Australia. Oh, it's one of the things that we miss most is to, you know, ride our bicycle through the beautiful trails. And we loved that too. we had this experience in Melbourne. I don't know if it is in everywhere in Australia, but in Melbourne it's quite popular. Anzac Day. Well, my kids had to start learning English, and the best way of doing that is to try to put them in different activities. So every different activity they had the chance of participating, we just enrolled them. And one of them, which was one of the most amazing ones, was the Scouts. They joined the Scouts, both of them. So my daughter was a cub, and my son was a cub in the beginning, and then he became a Scout. And then they had the experience through Anzac Day, the whole night. The last we forget. I think you remember that. But then I had this problem because my son, he's got ADHD. I don't know if you know what it is. He's very hyperactive. And at school, it was fantastic because everybody admired. They said, oh, he's so smart. His IQ is fantastic. But then in the Scouts, everything was so easy for him, and it was hard for him to do it at the same speed that others did because he was always moving on and the other ones. So one of the leaders said, I need your help because I cannot do it. You know, I'm alone. I only have one helper. Would you like to start helping? And then I became an assistant leader. And detail, I was a full-time student doing my PhD the whole day, but I was also as an assistant leader with the Scouts. Amazing opportunity of going camping, knowing all the parents, having this amazing knowledge about Australia history and costumes, everything, customs. And then they finally enrolled in the regular school. So this is the school that was near our house. No hat, no play, right? Assembly every Monday morning, amazing. I always use this experience with my students. I say, you know that because we teach together in some courses. So I say, you know what happened when I was in Australia? There were 400 students in a court, and then the director, the principal came. Everybody was talking. She just raised her hand, and every single kid would stop talking. And they start from 5. And they know how to respect the elderly people when they start speaking. So do you think it is a problem here in Brazil when we have to ask you to stop talking 4 or 5 times before starting a class or in the middle of the class? I don't think it is lack of culture or different culture. I think it's lack of respect. And they start thinking, reflecting, you're right. We should not do that. So I always bring this experience to my classrooms. And it's an experience I had there with the little kids. And then my son used to do judo here in Brazil. He got into the state team and even took part of a national competition in Australia. And this one he made it first, but the other one he made third. So it was amazing. She started doing judo there, but she was actually in love with camping, and her passion is dancing. So she was also doing ballet and tap. And that was her group. That's Melina number 6. So in the end, everybody was adapted. And my husband, he was always there. He was always there helping, picking up the kids when I had to stay longer in the uni. It was really a group work. I had not done anything alone. It was, a staff activity. So adaptation done, but then let's go back to the PhD, right? I still have the PhD going on. Amazing, fascinating, multicultural environment. Everybody said about it, right? We had these people coming from everywhere. So in my room, I had a person from Korea, another one from China, a Persian, me from Brazil. Everybody said I was from Russia, but yeah. And then my best friends from Bangladesh. So my kids learn how to eat with their hands in their place, going there, babysitting you. Another good friend of mine from Bangladesh too. And my supervisor, Mr. Manzoor, was from Bangladesh. So he had this Bangladesh in the Aussie accent. Amazing. It was fantastic. Well, the work system was different. We were talking about efficiency here in Brazil. Huh? Too much talk, not so much production sometimes. And then there was something that they had to work straightforward with us. That was skill development, organization, and motivation. And I had to organize with a lot of to organize myself and work with a lot of discipline because I had my family at home, and I could not stay the whole day in the university. And my supervisor understood it. When I had to work at home because kids were sick, and sometimes both of them were sick. So my husband helped with one, and I helped with the other one. So I had to work at home. I had never had any trouble because he knew that I was trying to do it in an organized way. But the deal was, okay, no matter how many hours you work, but you have to publish. Publish and publish. And before, I had only published 3 or 4 papers, even though I had already been a lecturer. But there was not a lot of demand here. So, okay, publish, publish, publish. Well, there was a problem with the co-tutel agreement. Each institution had a different format for the completion of the thesis. So I started, since I arrived there, I started dealing with both of them to try to find a way of making a unique format, using a traditional way, but they had different procedures. So I said, well, let's put things together, publish, 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 different formats. Let's use another approach because deadline is coming and I had to finish my thesis. So, wow, thesis by associate papers. That was the only option because this is how I would be able to fit into the 2 available formats. So, this is the number of papers I've done during my thesis. So, before I submitted, 6 papers accepted in journals, 4 papers published in conferences, 2 other papers submitted to journals that had not been accepted before my PhD was over. So in the end, I had 10 associate papers. They were linked. It was not just like adding paper by paper, because there was a link between one and the other. And in the end, my thesis was chosen as the best one at the civil engineering group at Unicamp. So they submitted my thesis to the CAPES Thesis Award. It was not selected in the Brazilian ranking, but at least at Unicamp, they appreciated what I had done. And this was the result. In the end, my graduation and my coworkers, the favorite ones, right? Well, I am a lecturer here, and I had the feeling that, you know, I work in an institution that is not in the top, unfortunately, right? But there are also good things behind it. Most of my students are students that didn't really choose my institution to come first. Probably they had chosen USP, Unicamp, Unesp. As they hadn't passed, they go to mine. Or some of them hadn't even tried because they come from vulnerable situations. That's why the Federal Institute of Technology came, to offer people that have less opportunities an opportunity to improve their skills and have space in the market in the future, right? And I feel very honored to be in this position, because I think that it fits what I am, you know? I would love, actually, to publish a paper and go to science. My papers were between qualis B2 and A2. None of them were A1. And it's understandable, because I had to do it in a short time of 2 years. And I tried to do it, every chapter was a paper. So you do not have such a profound result to publish in such a high impact factor journal. But I was happy to do that. It's the kind of format that I wanted, because it was easy to explain step by step what I was doing in my research. And my research was about modeling floods in ungauged basins, because we didn't have enough data at the basin I was studying about in Caraguatatuba. And it was very challenging for my supervisor too, in Australia, because he had never worked with a person that had no data. All of his students had lots of data, and the problem was that, how to choose the best data? And I had to estimate lots of data, use mathematical, statistical approaches, alternative techniques to get these parameters and start modeling. And this was something new in that place that I was occupying. So I started developing this technique when I came back to Brazil, because I saw that these friends of mine, my peers, all of them, before finishing undergraduation, they had already had 5, 6 papers published. And this is not what happens in Brazil, even at USP. Maybe now they're starting, but it's not like that. Generally, people start publishing when they go to their graduation, right? After they finish their bachelor degree. And this is not what happens there. They started publishing the first year of university. And I said, I had to do that. But how am I going to do it? Because my students come from vulnerable situations sometimes. Many don't know how to read English well. Hard work. But let's do it. The more challenging it is, the better you have to prove that yourself that you can, you know? The better opportunities you have to prove yourself, to put yourself in the end, in a gratifying, with a gratifying feeling that you've done something that made a difference, right? So I started working with my students. We're only going to work on problems, trying to find, we're going to find a solution for real problems. So every single class, we try to show them that there is a place where this hypothetical concept is shown, that it happens somewhere in real situations. So they try to come with the solution for these basic problems. And then I started bringing them extra activities throughout their course to improve their English skills, to have more discipline and also motivate them to try to make them work in an international context. And the problem was to make them read. So I started working with 4 different books in each subject. And they were crazy. Please, can you select one chapter for the test? And I said, no. You are going to use the 3 books. What is going to happen? I don't know how to read in English. Okay. There are other 3 options. There are 4 books here listed. What is going to happen in my test? I said, look, just read. If you read and understand, you succeed. And we make them read more. I started doing that since last year, and the result is amazing. And they started publishing. Can you believe? Second semester, I had this offer of giving the course of research methodology. And I said, oh, pair of gloves, let's do it, you know? I'll do that. And generally, professors spend 2 months giving them the theoretical concept about research. We had it only in 2 classes. And I separated it in different groups. They explained to their peers what each kind of research was. And then from the 3rd day of class, we have already selected some articles according to their field preference. And they would study this article and prepare some activities throughout the semester. And in the end of the semester, we simulated an international conference, and each group of 3 students had to present the article that was in English. And about 20% of my students have a basic level of English. But they made it. And 9 of the 13 students submitted their papers. 6 of them successfully published. Well, they were accepted last week. And then we also started this research group leadership. I'm the leader of this group at my institution, and it's linked to CMPQ. It's called GETCHES, Group of Engineering, Technology, Innovation, and Sustainability. And these are some of the activities that we started doing with them. So we have the research methodology group. These are the students that had to prepare their activities using English articles. And then this student presented his work at the Latin American Conference of Hydraulics that was in Buenos Aires, Argentina last year. These are my students after seeing the Rotary Exchange students coming to give them a lecture about future possibilities going overseas. This is when Luisa visited us. We had a packed auditorium, many students interested, and a revolution happened because everybody only talked about going to US, Europe, and now they only ask about Australia. I don't know what you're going to do, but you have to provide them a chance of, having more information about going there someday. And now we also try to bring them to international fairs. For example, FEICON, it's the construction fair. And it was very interesting because we saw students trying to communicate with the international sellers that were there in the stands, the Chinese, the Koreans, and then they would reproduce to us all the questions because we asked them to make a report about, some innovative products that were offered there, and they've done it without speaking English. So they prepared some questions. They would ask, spell please, even make jokes with the Chinese. Amazing. We also brought them to Foz do Iguaçu Falls last year, and it was hard work because we always work with low budget. So they had to sell hot dogs, soup, and do all kinds of crazy activities to, have funds to go to this visit, international visit. So what are my future expectations? Well, I want to make my students self-confident. I really do. I believe they can. I want to develop their competences in an international context, because this is the only way to go nowadays, due to globalization. If you want to succeed, you have to have this in your mind. I want them to improve their reading skills and also their critical analysis. It's what we were talking about, being alfabetizado and letrado, right? It's not only important to read, but it's important to understand what you're reading, to make the analysis about it, to know how to judge. I want to enhance their ability to write technically and academically, and motivate them to publish. I always tell them that somebody that is prepared to write academically while doing their course, even if they don't want to go to the academy, if they want to become sellers, technical sellers in the future, they'll be the best ones to sell their products. They'll know how to use the proper methods to convince you that their products are the best ones to be used in that situation. And I'm trying to work through collaboration with my Australian peers and use my students, to co-work with us. And I would really expect from this meeting that we could make a connection, a real connection, and try to promote a joint research with different institutions here in Brazil, and maybe also link to your previous experiences in Australia. Before saying thank you, I'm going to conclude with a sentence that I heard when I was in my graduation ceremony, and it made me cry. Because the guest speaker of my graduation ceremony was Nelson Mandela's grandson. Just after listening that he was coming, I was, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to see him? Yeah, because he's done cinema in Australia, and he was our guest speaker. And he said the sentence that was, look, God did not make poverty. Humans were the ones responsible for that. So humans are the ones that are going to have to solve this problem. And you have the technical skills to really collaborate. So it's your mission, after finishing your PhD, to do that. You need to fight against poverty. So this is my message. I think that it's all related to that. Let's fight against all kinds of poverty, not only lack of material resources, but spirituality, intellectuality, all kinds of poverty that we have spread in the world. Thank you so much.
Parabéns pela apresentação, muito legal.
Obrigada.
Pergunta mais assim, os seus alunos conseguiram chegar no final do semestre fazendo artigos em inglês, é isso? Mesmo com o grupo tendo um nível de inglês mais baixo? Como é que foi? Como é que foi isso? Assim?
Foram duas etapas. Primeiro, eles trabalharam em cima de artigos de outros autores, que foi o primeiro bimestre. Então, aí eles fizeram a explanação do que eles entenderam, a parte, dividindo como é mais ou menos num congresso. Aí, já durante o primeiro bimestre, eles já foram pegando, porque eles estão no primeiro ano de engenharia, então não dava para dar assuntos muito complexos e muito específicos. Então, eu já selecionei das 5 áreas da engenharia civil, vários artigos, e aí eles escolheram o que eles sentiam que eles tinham mais afinidade, e depois eles escolheram tópicos relacionados para trabalhar em cima de revisão de literatura. Então, por exemplo, eu tive 3 alunos que trabalharam com plano de saneamento, lá na região do litoral norte. Outros com resíduo de construção civil. Eu tenho alguns que trabalharam com os critérios para caracterizar ciclovia, porque em Caraguatatuba as ciclovias são muito utilizadas. Né? Teve um outro que está trabalhando numa iniciação científica com fibra em cimento para fazer concreto leve. Então, assim, eles pegaram os temas que eles queriam fazer revisão de literatura e eles trabalharam assim com muito fichamento, de a maior parte de artigos internacionais, sem falar inglês. E aí eles fizeram esses artigos. Teve alguns que foram em português, que mandaram para congresso. Esse da Argentina foi em português, porque era em português ou em espanhol. E teve alguns que e ainda estão fazendo em inglês. Só que, assim, eles passaram um trabalho muito difícil para mim também, porque eles passam, muitos usam o Google Tradutor, né? Então, é bastante trabalhoso, mas muito gratificante. E eu falei para eles, olha, eu não vou ser coautora. Eu vou ser coautora dos que estão relacionados à minha área de formação de pós-graduação. E alguns professores ajudaram, assim, que era a área deles. Então, por exemplo, um da área de concreto, a Nicole da área de arquitetura, um outro da área de transporte, outro da área de geotecnia. Porque eu falei, eu acho assim, deselegante eu querer dar palpite de uma coisa que eu não entendo, né? Assim, muito a fundo. Eu posso fazer. Aí eu fiz o proofreading só para. Então, eles fizeram em inglês. E, olha, são do Instituto Federal. Então, o meu sonho, eu sou presidente do NDE, que é o Núcleo Docente Estruturante. E uma coisa que é muito trabalhada no MEC hoje é a gente fazer a integração das disciplinas. Então, uma coisa que a gente está trabalhando muito é fazer essa integração, né? Então, o que você vai ver, por exemplo, em geoprocessamento, né? Vamos trazer da arquitetura já o banco de dados de AutoCAD, vamos trazer da topografia, o que você vai estar trabalhando em hidráulica, vamos trazer de Física 2, vamos trazer de MEC-Flu. Então, a gente está tentando fazer isso entre as disciplinas. E foi muito legal, porque deu para fazer isso com comunicação e expressão, já focando em metodologia de pesquisa, né? Metodologia de pesquisa, e agora eu estou dando inglês instrumental, que é uma matéria optativa. É que eu sou formada em letras também. Então, eu tenho essa eu posso legalmente oferecer esse curso, né? Mas, assim, o inglês instrumental, a gente está trabalhando com artigos também. Então, os que fizeram artigos em português, eles estão agora melhorando em inglês nessa disciplina, né? Então, está uma disciplina completando a outra.
Você está nos dois lados, né, do inglês instrumental.
Então. E a gente está trabalhando nisso, na interdisciplinaridade, entendeu? Então, o nosso sonho é, assim, chegar no final do curso e todos os alunos terem feito pelo menos uma iniciação científica. Todos. A gente quer que todos façam. Um trabalho, um projeto de extensão, pode ser um estágio, pode ser, né, uma bolsa-trabalho e uma iniciação. Então, essa é a nossa meta. E a gente já chegou em quase 50% da turma, em 3 anos de curso. Então,
primeiro, parabéns pela apresentação.
Obrigada, Carla.
Não só pela apresentação, mas pelo trabalho que tu tens desenvolvido. Assim, eu fico muito feliz por ter a oportunidade de ir conhecer pessoas engajadas na educação, que acreditam que a educação realmente transforma as pessoas, pessoas inovadoras e engajadas assim nesse propósito, né? Então, parabéns. Inquieta também, né? Dá para perceber.
É genética a hiperatividade do meu filho.
Então, a pergunta que eu faço é, pelo que tu trazes, assim, tem uma trajetória de sucesso, não só teu, como professora, docente, mas também dos teus alunos que conseguem se desenvolver e ter uma entrega bem significativa. A minha pergunta é bem objetiva. A que tu achas que deve esse sucesso, na tua opinião?
Então, eu acho que tem 2 coisas. Uma, porque eu acho que o meu público, por exemplo, quando eu fazia poli, eram 180 alunos que entravam por ano. Então, eu tinha amizade com alguns professores, depois de eles me darem 2 disciplinas, mas a maior parte nem sabia o nome da gente, né? O nosso público lá é pequeno, a gente tem 40 alunos. E o nosso grupo de professores é pequeno, a gente tem 14 professores. Então, a gente repete muito o número de disciplinas para a mesma turma. E a gente cria um vínculo maior entre os alunos. Então, quando o colega falou até da questão de profissionalismo, vida pessoal, concordo plenamente, porque, às vezes, eu sou muito chata. Eu estava até falando para uma outra colega, eu falei, ó, não pense que por conta da gente se doar tanto, todos os alunos gostam de mim, não. Porque eu sou conhecida como chata, exigente, né? Eu não dou ponto que não merece. No entanto, eu sempre dou recuperação continuado ao longo de todo o curso. Mas não tem essa de ficar fazendo trabalhinho para substituir nota. Eles sabem, eles nem pedem mais. Eu falo, vocês têm que ter dignidade, vai? Pedir coisa que vocês sabem que não vão conseguir, nem adianta, né? Brinco, né, com eles. Mas, então, eu acho assim, a gente tem uma proximidade maior dos alunos. Isso facilita. Tá? Assim, quando eu estava na Austrália, que eu fui também tutora da disciplina de estatística, né? O grupo era pequeno, mas eu via que lá era um ambiente mais formal. Então, a gente não tinha essa condição de ter uma proximidade tão grande do aluno, a não ser que o aluno te procurasse para fazer uma iniciação, mas não tinha essa abertura. Então, isso tem umas vantagens. Então, a questão de envolver um pouco o pessoal, né, às vezes, ele também é benéfico. Ele pode atrapalhar, mas você tem que colocar um limite ali, uma rédea, sabe? Então, o aluno vira e fala, olha, eu estou com dor de barriga. Eu falo, aguenta esse ponto aí, espera terminar a aula, depois você vai. Não. Pode ser? Você aguenta? Né? Já cheguei a dar carona para ir no UPA. Mas, assim, aguenta as pontas. Vamos fazer o nosso trabalho primeiro? E tem hora que também a gente não pode ceder, né? A gente trabalha assim com... Mas é um grupo pequeno, então eu acho que isso facilita. Talvez quebrar um pouco esse paradigma da distância, porque muitos alunos acham, poxa, professora, nossa, doutora, fez doutora lá. Imagina, na minha casa, ninguém saiu do 2º grau. A gente tem muitos alunos assim. E aí, se a gente chegar com essa posição soberba, o nosso trabalho, junto com os alunos, não vai ter sucesso. Porque ele nunca vai achar que ele vai ter condição, ele vai sempre ter aquilo que eu falei que a gente tem que fazer, tem um trabalho à parte, que é fazer a autoconfiança dele crescer. Então, se você chegar num patamar muito elevado perto do dele, se você não tentar se aproximar, você não resgata. Né? Então, aquela foto da Camila, eu me emocionei, né, dela abraçada com as presidiárias e contando a história dos meninos, né, no sistema também da Fundação Casa, tal. A aproximação física das 20 horas que ela fez de trabalho, isso foi um gatilho para dar certo. Que se ela tivesse numa posição lá de doutora, de tanta experiência, 30, né, número 30 da forma, eles não iam se aproximar. Então, eu acho que isso facilita. Entendeu?